Welcome to the Playroom, guys. This is Juman Khan, and what I wanted to do today was do a little commentary. I was going to make a best of PlayStation Network free to play video like I had done a few months ago, and to, today I took some video. One of the videos is Hexen here, which you're seeing right now. This video is this game rather. Sorry, sometimes I mix up my words. This game is free to play. It's not too bad. What you're seeing here is the tutorial, and the majority of what you'll see through this video is the tutorial of this game. I didn't want to really use other games because a lot of the stuff that's hit the market that's free to play has gone free to pay, as some people say it, or pay to win. Um, I've noticed over the last couple months, especially the last half of this year, with EA pushing its free-to-pay model into everything that they do. It was just in FIFA and Madden, and now it's been pushed into everything they do, whether it fits or not. You've got the star cards in Battlefield Front 2. You've got card selection stuff in Need for Speed, which doesn't make any sense. And Need for Speed is pay to win. Battlefront 2 is pay to win. FIFA is pay to win. UFC is pay to win. Madden is pay to win. All these games are pay to win. And when EA finally decided to do this and not give a shit and just keep pushing it, I realized something is really, really wrong with the industry right now. And the state of gaming today, frankly, is really bad. There are three paths that games take now, and it's either free to play, um, pay to win, or the traditional $60 experience model. And even in the traditional $60 experience model, you still don't get the whole game for $60. You have the tiered system, the standard, the silver, and the gold. No matter what they call it, it's still standard silver and gold. And all the while, devs and publishers are telling you they can't survive or they need these things to make money because $60 is too cheap for a game because the price hasn't increased in so long. And one of the great things that happened with Battlefront 2 coming out and being pay to win and the big backlash that happened was EA tipped its hand and let everyone know that they didn't need microtransactions to make money. They don't need microtransactions to make money. And in fact, their profit projections were going to be on target and they would not be losing any money even if Battlefront 2 didn't have microtransactions in it, which Disney stepped in and made them remove them. So they kind of tipped their hand there, and that also lets you know that games are not becoming so expensive that $60 can't sustain the model. $60 is still plenty of money because more and more people are buying games digitally. That savings that they save from not having logistics and printing CDs is not passed on to you. They still charge you $60, so $60 is still a pretty profitable price point. Also with the tiered system, and I'm fine with the tiered system. I'd rather have a tiered system than loot boxes and microtransactions. But I'm fine with the tiered system. And they still make money, and they can make even more money off the tiered system. But they tipped their hands, and it let everybody know. And plus, people were able to go and dig and find out that actually EA's dev costs on games for the last 10 years has been going steadily down. Mostly because they haven't really produced a new IP in almost 10 years. The newest one they produced was Titanfall, and it wasn't even theirs. They were just publisher on Titanfall 1 and 2. Now they've bought Respawn, which is spells doom for them because probably in the next 5 years they'll be closed and out of business. But that's the way it's going, and more games are abandoning the $60 experience for pay to win or free to play. And what you had was for a little while was premium games borrowing mechanics from free to play to make even more money off of their games. And now what we're seeing is premium games have perverted that practice into not selling you just a skin or maybe a costume, not well, which is a skin, but a skin's really more for like weapons, but maybe a costume for your character, a skin for your gun. Overwatch does voice lines and emotes and stuff, and they're not just doing that. They are actually doing um, now power buffs and experience gainers and things that give you an advantage over the other player in the game. And now what's happened is free to play games have gone the opposite direction, and now they're taking that idea because they've seen it can work in a premium game and applying it to their free to play model or space. And now you have free to play games, even some older ones, that are now introducing um, free to pay to win mechanics. One of the ones that I know of personally, I play with and I interact with and I know about is Paladins. Some of my channel has some Paladin content on it, um, and what's happening right now is on PC. See, with Paladins, they always put the changes out on PC first, and then they come to console a few weeks later, and that goes for champions and all balancing and all that. OB64 is on PC. It's hitting play console relatively soon, if not already now. And OB64 changed everything because high-res went to this cards unbound system. And from all reports from PC, it's totally destroyed the casual experience in Paladins. So if you start reading up on what some of the Paladin forums are saying, and even some YouTubers that their channels are just dedicated to Paladins, it doesn't look good. And the term free to or play to pay to win, sorry, sometimes it makes my words up, keeps coming out, and it doesn't spell anything good. And I've seen some of it, and it has totally destroyed the casual matches in Paladins. Um, so the state of gaming right now is pretty bad. I mean, if you go back to the middle 90s, really is where it started. You go back to the middle 90s and forward up to about 2004, gaming was seen as a new form of interactive art or a new form of interactive entertainment. Really, so much so where, especially with single-player story-based games and cinematic experiences, Metal Gear Solid, for instance, was one of them that's very cinematic. Um, Peter Jackson himself, when he was talking about working with Microsoft to do a Halo movie or a Halo TV show, he said that gaming was a new burgeoning form of storytelling, and that it was reaching a point where there may be some projects that were better to do as a game because they would be an interactive experience than they were to do as a book or a movie or a TV show, because gaming was on the verge of becoming a new medium for storytelling. And that's why people like Guillermo del Toro and Peter Jackson himself were interested in getting into helping develop some games or working on some games. And then in 2004, you have the Xbox 360 releasing, the PlayStation 3 releasing, and the Nintendo Wii. And what happens is you have an unusually long console cycle. People getting tired of seeing the same old games. Those consoles are getting really long in the tooth. What they could do with the consoles was getting to the point where it was maxed out because the consoles had limited RAM capability. And they were finding new ways to sort of extract a little bit more power out of each of those consoles, but they never really got too far ahead of what they were making the games look like and the experiences they could deliver. So people were turning to mobile games and free-to-play games on their phones, and that's when the whole consoles are dead. The traditional console is dead. The market is shifting, And the market wasn't shifting. It's just people were tired of seeing the same old games and not having any new experiences to do on the consoles that were getting a little long in the tooth. During that time, you also had devs trying to figure out ways to make more money, and publishers, specifically publishers, trying to figure out ways to make more money. And that's when you started seeing, pre-ordering becoming a big, big thing where, there was a certain gun you could get if you pre-ordered. You could only get it if you pre-ordered. There was a certain mission you could get if you pre-ordered, and you could only get it if you pre-ordered. And then it started where GameStop might have a mission and Walmart has a different mission and Amazon has a different mission. And then to get all the missions, you might have to pre-order from every place. You might have to do 3 different pre-orders just to get those missions and then cancel 2 of them and keep 1 of them just to get all the stuff. And then it comes in with the tiered system, and the tiered system starts dividing that kind of stuff up, and season passes. And then a little bit towards the end of the gen, you started seeing things like loot boxes and microtransactions from free-to-play games start entering premium games. And one of the biggest ones was Mass Effect 3, where it had the Spectre packs. And I knew people that had spent $150 extra the day the game released to go when they went into the multiplayer part, which was not competitive at all, but they still spent $150, had everything maxed out, had all the characters and weapons and everything maxed out because they had spent an extra $150. And then there was an extra character and mission that you couldn't get unless you bought the day one DLC. And all those kinds of practices kind of started then. And then you fast forward another, few years, the PlayStation 4, the Xbox One come out, and another shitty practice starts coming in, pay to win. And EA starts pushing it. And that's when you start hearing the narrative that, the price of games has to increase because $60 isn't enough for them to make their money back. They can't survive off of that. And to keep making games, games are getting really expensive to make. Then you see this other idea start cropping up, and it starts with EA and sort of Blizzard too. Games as a Service, or GAS, GAAS. And EA really latches onto this idea because they've started doing this thing with FIFA. And they start selling loot boxes. We'll call it the Wilson loot box because that's basically what it is, because he's the progenitor of it. He starts it in FIFA, and FIFA becomes pay to win. If you buy the packs, you can get the cards, you can get a team that's better than anybody else's online and steamroll them. So it immediately becomes pay to win. And then this idea is permeated into Madden, and then MLB, and then to, those sports games, the UFC. And then all of a sudden it starts in Mass Effect, and then it also then becomes part of it is a part of every game EA produces now. So now you have it in games where it doesn't even make sense, like Need for Speed. Need for Speed has a card system that applies to your car. You need to soup up your engine, you got to get a special card out of a pack. That doesn't make any fucking sense. It's a racing game. And then you can get those packs by racing, but the grind to get up to the next level for the racing is too big. So you can instantly see that it's pushing you to spend real money. They're always looking for that comfort zone of where you're going to be the most uncomfortable so they can get you to start spending money. And Battlefront 2 was great because people started to see what was happening. They were kind of, the average gamer out there was kind of, I'm sure they noticed it, but they were just absent-minded about it. when they did this with Star Wars, it did some great things because it brought attention to loot boxes. People started paying attention to what a loot box was, and the mechanic of gambling was entering gaming. And it also did something great because it tipped EA's hand and every other dev's hand out there, or publisher out there, because we realized, and some people did some digging and found out that the cost of gaming wasn't increasing. The development costs of gaming was actually going down, especially for EA because they were used as an example, had been trending down for 10 years because they had been pushing the games as a service. They want games as a service because it takes away, one, your ownership and right to resell. Two, it also means they don't have to put as much work in, and they can sell you more content for while actually putting in less effort, but still make the same amount of money, if not more. And that's why it's a horrible model that no one should be supporting, but there are people out there who think it's fantastic, and I don't understand it. You're getting less for the same amount of money. That's never a good thing. You always want to get more for the same amount of money if you can, not less. It's always a struggle between you and them. They're always wanting you to do more for less money, and you're always wanting to get more money for doing less. That's just the way it works. But these recent years, it seems gamers are fine with getting less and paying more. I just don't understand that. So the state of gaming today, frankly, I think with games taking those three paths, pay to win, free to play, or the traditional $60 experience, is really headed downward, and it's bringing the medium down, not growing it. It's not growing the medium as an interactive art form, which attracted people like Peter Jackson and Guillermo del Toro. While there are publishers out there, Sony is one of them, thank goodness, that are taking a different view on it. I'm sure they're still going to go games as a service, but they may not push it too hard. It's having a negative effect on the industry, in my opinion. It's having a negative effect on the medium as a form of storytelling, as an art form. Um, because you have just plain laziness on the part of developers and publishers, with games releasing broken, um, glitched to no end, clearly having not enough quality control or playtesting done. Um, and now you have EA and Activision that we know of. They're the only ones we know of so far, and only because people have dug up papers that they have written. And EA specifically has papers that specifically say that these things that they're doing are already in their games. EA has done away with skill-based matchmaking. That will no longer their games no longer match you in PvP, no longer match you against players every time you play that you are on the same skill level as. If you're winning consistently, they're going to match you against players that steamroll you. If you're losing consistently, they're going to match you against players that suck worse than you do. So effectively, whether you win or lose or whatever the outcome is, it's no longer in your hands, or it's no longer based on your or your teammates' skill level. It's based on whether EA thinks you're going to stay involved and connected to the game and going to spend money. And that system, the papers that they have written specifically state that they are already in their games. They're already using these things in your games. So they're manipulating matchmaking to keep you, quote unquote, engaged with the game and spending money. They're psychologically manipulating you on a level that you have no idea about, behind the scenes, so that they can extract more money from you. That means also that they're tracking everything you do with a game. How long you're playing it, what characters you're playing, what maps you're playing on the most, who you're playing with or not playing with, which type of map modes or matches that you like, all those things. Activision put out a paper that specifically was going to that says that they can develop their matchmaking systems based on trying to get you to buy stuff by matching you with a player that's better than you that has something that you might want to purchase. They're taking they're taking player feedback and player metrics and using them to try and psychologically manipulate you to buying microtransactions. And the thing that just totally blows my mind is there's people out there that think this is just fine because they somehow think that they are immune to it. They somehow think that the developer is never going to find that thing that they want and make it a paid something or other. Now, Sony is going through a change, and they have just Andrew House has left. The person they chose to replace him is a Japanese man by the name of Kodera-san. Kodera-san comes from Sony and specifically was working on their games as a service, microtransaction area. And now he is the head of the president of that position that Andrew House was the president of. And to me, that doesn't sound good. Now, to his credit, on Twitter, he's gone out and said that Sony has a different vision for games as a service or a different vision from games as a service. But that doesn't really mean that they're going to follow through with that. You can't trust the developers and the publishers. You just can't, especially ones like EA and Activision, because they've lied to us. I mean, if you haven't picked up on their lies lately, then you haven't been paying attention. I mean, Jesus Christ, look at Destiny 2. More and more games are going over the cliff and pushing microtransactions harder and harder. And to Destiny's detriment, if you pay attention to player numbers and player retention and player engagement, Destiny 2 is bleeding. It's hemorrhaging right now.
Can you deal with that?
And the reason that is people are just tired of it. They're tired of being nickeled and dimed. They're tired of being promised this kind of experience and getting this shallow garbage that we just keep getting pushed on to us. And gamers, to their credit, are finally starting to push back. So I'm worried about the industry because these are the same practices. Now, I was very young when it happened. I was only 4 or 5 years old. I vaguely remember it. I had an Atari 2600. The 5200 had just come out. My grandmother had a Coleco, and it had the little attachment to play Atari games. The industry crashed, and I remember between the years, I vaguely remember, 85, 86 is when I started going to school. I was in kindergarten. 87, 88, people were started to talk about Nintendo. All my friends talked about Nintendo. They all had a Nintendo. They all had an NES. And we never called it SNES. We always called it NES. And what you had during those days was, when the NES was coming out, was they pretty much Nintendo saved the market because it had crashed. And a lot of the things that were happening then, there was a lot of shovelware. There was oversaturation in the market. Now, there's all kinds of videos on this topic that you can look up and watch, and there are varying opinions on what caused it. And the crash pretty much was very localized to the United States only. Europe and Japan did not experience this. But it happened, and absolutely shovelware, poor game development, and overpromising, and the oversaturation of different people making game consoles in the States absolutely contributed to that. And if you look at a lot of those practices, you're seeing them again here today. And unfortunately, you're seeing a lot of that play out again today. You have companies, you know, EA, like I've said already, doing loot boxes and pay to win and locking things that were previously available behind paywalls and locking things that were previously available in a game in a loot box and making the loot boxes only available through either horrendous amounts of grinding or spending real money. That's the equivalent of somebody putting out a game like, ET and hyping the shit out of it, and then people getting it and finding out it's garbage and it doesn't sell, and they make too many copies and they have to abandon a lot of um, their stockpiles of stuff and dump a lot of the stuff into the ground and like the dump out there in Arizona. And that's happening today. And that's the problem. Greed and these companies becoming corporations and then becoming too big, being publicly traded. The negatives to the industry, I think, far outweigh the benefits of it. And the you know back then you could not see, they didn't see the cliff, they just kept charging headlong. Before they knew it, they were over it and they were crashing towards their doom. And it's like we didn't learn anything. And there's a theory in psychology that says the further away you get from an event, the less people are likely to be cautious about something or remember it the way that the people who were there at the time remember it. And it's absolutely happened with things like the workplace and um, the Great Depression. And I mean, if you look at what's happened in our society here in the States over the last 20 years, you can see it. I mean, in the early 90s, the late 90s, early aughts, we got rid of a lot of the regulation that was put in place during the Great Depression because now we were smarter and we were better about money, and that wasn't going to happen again. And what happened? The recession happened. The recession that was almost the only reason it wasn't a depression is because we had those social systems for people to fall back on that we didn't have during the depression, that were put into place after the depression to keep it from becoming a depression. That's the only reason it didn't become a depression, is because we had those social systems in place. And the same thing's happening in gaming now. Poor quality standards, poor quality control, uh, buggy, bad games being pushed out, games not living up to the promise, games not living up to the hype or the advertisement or what have you, or what was on the box. And we have gone to the point where we are so far away from that event in the 80s that people aren't weary of what could happen now. They see, people like me who say that, like when EA was doing the day one DLC and the microtransactions in Mass Effect, we were telling people that this is what's going to happen. Eventually, it's going to be pay to win. And they were like, oh, no, no, they're not dumb enough to do that. They're not dumb enough to do that. And here we are, 12 years later, EA has produced games, and every game is pay to win. Every game they produce is pay to win. Every IP they have is pay to win. None of them are not devoid of some kind of loot box pay to win system. They all have it. And then people were calling us alarmists and, the slippery slope nonsense. And here we are. We've gone down the slope. We've already slipped down it. There is no slippery slope. It wasn't a slippery slope. It was a straight slide towards it. And it's because of that phenomenon that's kind of talked about in psychology today, where, like I said, you get so far removed from something, people just don't become weary of it anymore. And to me, that's sad because it's a drag on the medium. It's a drag on the industry. And I think the medium could benefit a lot more from going back to a traditional form of game development. And that's not to say games like Overwatch, like you're watching now, or Paladins, or Battlefront 2, or any of that stuff is bad or wrong. It's just I think that they don't have to be based around microtransactions. They don't need microtransactions. I mean, Overwatch is a decent game, and it does not need microtransactions at all. And in fact, they don't make a lot of money off of them, as people have said. So why are they there? Well, they're just kind of there so they can make extra money for no reason. So let me know what you think down in the comments below. Tell me what you think. If you like the video, subscribe. I try to put more content out. But thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.